conflict over Confederate monuments and symbols have intensified since 2015. The debate began to swell after the actions of Dylan Roof, a white supremacist who killed 9 black churchgoers in South Carolina. This tragedy undoubtedly sparked a national debate about racism and white supremacy and resulted in the removal of the Confederate flag from outside of the South Carolina State House. The heinous actions of Dylan Roof have pushed this topic into the forefront of mainstream media and stirred up a desire for change so strong that it can turn destructive. The widespread protests have urged many cities to tear down their Confederate statues. All around the United States, major decisions are being made about the future of Confederate statues. And today, Richmond, Virginia lies at the center of the debate. Richmond, the former capital of the Confederacy, is home to Monument Avenue, a grassy mall with 5 towering statues, 4 of which are in commemoration of Confederate war heroes, and 1 monument in the honor of Richmond native Arthur Ashe, an African-American tennis star. The first time I drove into Richmond was back in 2016. On my way into the city, I distinctly remember rounding a corner and seeing a massive statue of Robert E. Lee. And this caught my attention because it seemed so out of place. As I continued to drive down what I would soon learn is Monument Avenue, I saw each Confederate statue, and it started to jog my memory. I realized that the Confederacy lives on in many ways in Virginia. I grew up in a town called Dumfries, just 30 minutes south of DC. Every day I drove to work or soccer practice on the Jefferson Davis Highway. On those drives, I saw popular vanity plates with Confederate flags proudly displayed. Even a few of my rival high schools were named after Confederate veterans: Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee. I realized that Virginia is filled with Confederate names and symbols. With a quick Google search, I learned that Virginia has more Confederate monuments than any other state, with a total of 242. When I see these statistics and drive past these monuments in person, they seem out of context. But to better understand their meaning today, it's important to look at the context and meaning of these statues at the time that they were built. Monument Avenue was born after the death of Robert E. Lee on October 12, 1870. The organizations that created the statues were made up of former Confederates and Richmond's white elite. Funding came from the Commonwealth of Virginia and the city of Richmond. According to the American Civil War Museum, monument associations solicited financial support from Virginia's schoolchildren as a part of a campaign to educate the next generation about their Confederate heritage. The white elite who funded, built, and revealed these statues did not gather the opinion of anti-Confederates and African Americans in the community. Instead, they forced their view of Confederate history on the city of Richmond. Some city council members argued that the city had no right to throw a big parade to benefit only a certain class of people. However, very few people publicly challenged the appropriateness of the statues. The The South may revere the memory of its chieftains. It takes wrong steps in doing so, and proceeds to go too far in every similar celebration. It serves to retard the progress of the country and forges heavier chains with which to be bound. All is over. The birth of Monument Avenue received minimal controversy, and the unveiling of statues attracted massive crowds in support. More than 80,000 people attended the reveal of the Jefferson Davis statue. The events provided an opportunity to reinforce the lost cause myth of the Civil War and perpetuate the argument that it was fought over states' rights. Ceremonies typically included parades of Confederate veterans and modern military units, prayers, and multiple speeches about the worthiness of the men being commemorated, and through them, the nobility of the Confederate cause. The speeches were intended not only to inspire and assemble the faithful, but to proselytize among generations and outsiders. It's no surprise that many Virginians oppose the removal of Confederate monuments. Generations have been indoctrinated to believe in a whitewashed history, one that tells a compelling story of virtue, honor, and Southern pride. After the tragedies in Charlottesville, politicians, community leaders, and concerned citizens weighed in on the subject.
It sends the message that we have not learned from our past. We have not learned that all God's children are created equal.
It's not about hate. It's not. And I'm like this, if you erase our history, we're bound to repeat our history.
What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner.
When we have the statues of Washington and Jefferson, they're portrayed doing things like being the father of our country, or writing the Declaration of Independence, or being president. Whereas these Confederate statues, they're in full army regalia, fighting a war against the United States for the perpetuation of slavery.
It just made my heart sink to see that sort of gathering of hate and division and intolerance. To me, it was akin to a Klan rally without the hoods.
This is how the cycle works. This is what happens when we turn history into nostalgia. There are people who really need to say, this is who we are, and these are our heroes, and we honor these people because they were good and they were noble and they were righteous. And we don't want to look at the other complexities of these individuals.
I'm offended by them. I think about my grandmother who grew up in the segregated South and the Deep South in the low country of South Carolina, 1923. She would be offended by those things. And I want to be on her side. I want to be on the side of the right. I don't think any other city out there, any other country or in the world celebrates another army taking up arms against its actual country, except here in the South. And that's why they're different to me.
Stoney's statement aligns with the view of the American Historical Association, which emphasizes the imperative of understanding historical context in any consideration of removing or recontextualizing monuments, or renaming public spaces. This notion eliminates the fear of forgetting the past while providing a well-rounded view of Confederate history. The Storefront for Community Design and Mob Studio invited teams of planners, architects, designers, artists, and individuals to participate in a competition to conceptually reimagine Monument Avenue by adding context to the statues. The design competition was created with the goal of facilitating a constructive conversation about the future of Monument Avenue. Camden Whitehead, architect and co-founder of Mob Studio, said, "Having all of these proposals around us sort of diffused the situation. It enabled us to talk about the proposals and not where an individual stood on the issues." A jury made up of locally knowledgeable practitioners representing planning, architecture, landscape architecture, historical, and social justice communities will announce the winners of the design competition on November 20th, 2019. The City of Richmond is aware of the design competition, but there's no promise that they'll implement any of the proposals. While the future of Monument Avenue is unclear, the discussion created by this exhibit represents progress for Richmond and gives hope for a solution that'll bring unity to the city.